Hi everybody, and welcome to Module 3. So actually this is our Module 2 Fireside Chat where we talk about Module 2 and look ahead to Module 3. First of all, I just got back from a vacation in Superior with my family, and I always like that Superior Duluth area, especially that aerial lift bridge if you've ever been there. We were fortunate enough to see back-to-back 1,000-foot ore freighters come through the area at Canal Park. Just amazing. If you ever have the opportunity to do that, go for it. My 5-year-old bought a stuffed moose at a gift shop. I think it was at the aquarium there. And it was the funniest thing because on the way home she said, well, now the moose won't be lonely at night. It'll get to stay with me in my bedroom. I just thought that was kind of a neat thing. We were at a Duluth Huskies baseball game last night. It's a stadium built in the 1930s as a CCC project, but they built it out of bricks that they took from downtown Duluth that were probably from, like the late 1800s. So it's really, it looks like it's from a league of their own. Just an amazing moment in time, the stadium. So they haven't updated it much. They did update the field, but we had 2 rain delays last night and it got to be too late, so we came home. But they do kind of different promos, and last night they had bring your dog to the game night. So there were all of these dogs on leashes all around us, and actually it was pretty uneventful. Nothing really changed with having 100 and some dogs at a game versus not. But I did not have a dog to bring, just myself. But it is a wonderful ballpark, Wade Stadium. It's really hard to get to. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not hard to get to. It's hard to find a parking spot if you can get there, because it was built in a residential area back in the 30s. So the way it's expanded today, there isn't much parking. I did manage a couple weeks ago when I was up there with my dad to rip the front of his Equinox off by trying to park on a hill next to the stadium. So do not do that. And they did put up an orange cone to commemorate where that happened a couple of weeks ago, to kind of a shout out to other people. Don't do this. But with a little black duct tape that night and a little work from the body shop when he got home, actually they didn't charge him anything and just able to kind of pop that back into place. But so word of the day, just make sure you know where you're parking, and don't get too crazy if you go to Wade Stadium, because your alternatives for parking are pretty slim. So a few shout outs. One, Aaron, your inclusion timeline of the silver screen was amazing. I loved how you went back to Charlie Chaplin and brought it right to modern day. You mentioned What's Eating Gilbert Grape, one of my favorite movies, just absolutely a favorite movie. And I think for aspects of inclusion, disability education, to show the importance of setting, of having goals and setting goals and following dreams, and the responsibility put upon siblings, also to care for their brother or sister that might have a disability. And we didn't really see too much of like Arnie in school in that movie, but we did see how the community would wrap around Arnie and work to be that he was included in the community. But just a wonderful movie. I really like that. So a couple other things. One is the camcorder, which is recording this right now, is the one that was in Superior. The screen is basically, it's almost impossible to look at. It's like glass. It's like a mirror. So I bought this thing, which is like this little hut you put over, and it works actually pretty well. So it's not like a perfect solution, but it's pretty good. So that helps. And today in the mail arrived, yes, the actual hardcover bound dissertation that I had completed back in May. So here it is, a copy for me, And then one that will be sent to Mom and Dad tomorrow, and another one to my Aunt Susan also tomorrow. And that's it. And for as much as something like this costs, the print in here isn't exactly straight. So not sure about that, but it's okay. Tracy, he talked about Roe Vargo, and he had a statement written by people who lived inclusion and not just observed it. And I think that's so important. And you can talk about what it's like to have an inclusive school, but if you've been in that situation where you've had a student with a disability in your classroom or multiple students with disabilities in your classroom, you serve them, that's a lot different discussion than not having that experience and talking about it. So again, Tracy, excellent point. You really did a good job of getting to the core of what the Roe Vargo discussion was all about. And Blair, thanks for mentioning Horace Mann, getting that link back to Wisconsin in your timeline and the contributions to inclusion. Today, I think Horace Mann would say, for inclusion of all students, we need to make sure that all students have access to nature as part of inclusion, so that nature be included in that. And there was a presentation, it was actually done at Viterbo a couple years ago, where it was a nature specialist, but he came in and was talking about the effects on youth from not having access to the outdoors. And you can read studies where if you're just in the presence, of a forest for 20 minutes, what it does for your endorphins and your mental processes and so forth. But I think we have situations of not only students with disabilities, but students who live in cities or apartments that just don't have access to those things. Remember a school forest? I mean, we probably still have them, but how often the kids go out and visit the school forest and really learn in that setting? So I don't know. It just kind of hit me. But Blair, thanks for bringing that out. Module 2, just a review. We're getting through the end of Module 2. We talked about the history of inclusion. I thought it was a terrific point to mention that we had early schools for children that were deaf and children that were blind. And those were schools, so there was an emphasis to educate. And when it came to a child that had an intellectual disability, a cognitive disability, that option really wasn't there. It was asylum. It was a place to put the child, and then the parents advised, move on with your life. Move on with your life. And as much as we think, that was back then, I encourage you to watch. I wrote it down. There's a documentary from 1983 called "Children of Darkness." You can find it on YouTube. 1983. So it is that timeline. It's right 1983, and it talks about children with and youth with cognitive disabilities. Who are placed basically in asylums at that time, early 80s. And you would be amazed at some of the things that are discussed in the movie, like a child was trying to run away, so they made him wear a pink bunny suit. And I think he had to stay in a dumpster, and 3 other boys had to stand around this dumpster to make sure that he didn't get out. And if he got out, then the 3 boys got punished. It's wild, it's crazy. But it's 1983. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, in 1983, I was still in elementary school. So actually, or maybe middle school. But I mean, it's our life. It's our lifetime, and we think of these things as being, way back there, but really not so. We've made a tremendous gains again in America in the last 20 years for inclusion. Looking also at we've had rapid advances in special education. I think we have a situation right now with the changes in IDEA and the changes in other laws, ESEA and so forth, where the courts really define out what that what that means. So we have situations right now where people interpret the laws very differently. And I've seen that in the specific learning disability criteria and so forth with schools. But we also run into the situation where we have other health impaired, which used to be a small percentage of students with disabilities and now is a growing percentage of students with disabilities. And what that is doing is capturing the number one growing area of diagnoses for youth with disabilities, which is anxiety, plus depression, plus other medical disability areas. Some of those served under 504, which is a kind of a branch off of the idea and special education. But we're seeing a lot more medical diagnoses come into the school, a lot more mental health type diagnoses. And one of the things too is it's very tricky how these diagnoses are made, because I worked with one school that was using a screener which totally was not designed to screen for mental health, and then making some pretty significant decisions based upon that, such as outside providers they had a grant, that were coming into the school to serve students, and then they would basically, these identified students, they would match up to services, but they were using a screener that really wasn't a mental health screener. So we're getting into territory right now with teachers, and we talk about inclusion, where the education, the professional development needs to change more into a medical-based, brain-based professional development model. Years ago as a director, one of the things, it wasn't that long ago as a director, I looked at everything that everybody attended throughout the year for professional development, and basically found that people went to things that we were already very good at. And building to your strengths is important, and we're going to talk about that in a later module. But we did not need to send 30 people every year to an autism conference. Of course, we needed to keep current on autism, but what was happening is we were looking, and I don't think we had anybody go to a math conference focused on math with students with disabilities. And as far as anything that was offered with mental health, I believe we maybe had one person go. So again, we got to get into these trends, and we need to move and start looking at including students who really, also come from pretty traumatic environments. I mean, it's just the reality of where things are at. So and those are starting to be there. Trauma-informed care, if you want to look that up. So, Roe, amazing story. See, I told you you'd love reading about Roe, and you did. So I want to give you another story that goes along with Roe. A few years ago, I was attending a conference, and I was in a breakout session, and there was a dad, just a typical dad, and he was giving this breakout session, and he had a daughter. I believe she was probably eighth grade, maybe right around there, with cerebral palsy. And one day her friends came over and just met with the dad and the mom, and I don't know where the daughter was, but met with mom and dad, and had kind of this heart-to-heart talk. And let's say that the 8th grade girl with cerebral palsy's name is Cheryl. So her friends met with mom and dad and said, you know what, Cheryl's got a birthday coming up, and it's great, we're gonna whatever for a birthday bash party, whatever. But have her wear sweatpants, and they're the cool kind, but they're still sweatpants. And she doesn't, no one has ever done her nails up or her hair, and like even her wheelchair, it's like really, it's very clean, but there's like nothing on it, like it's just, so what they were getting at is you need to realize you have a young lady right now. She's growing up, and she needs to be able to express herself. She loved at that time like the Backstreet Boys. So the dad was giving this presentation. He said, "Oh, I never thought about this." He said, "You're right. You're absolutely right." So he worked with these other two girls, and he talked about this pair of jeans that these other two girls, and I don't know if his wife and he and the daughter, I don't know who went out shopping, but they got this pair of jeans, and Cheryl loved them. And then they got out the Bedazzler. I don't know if you remember the Bedazzler. It was on every late night infomercial for probably a couple of years, but you could bedazzle rhinestones onto jeans and jackets and all of that stuff. And they just went to town with this thing. And Cheryl loved it. Got some, got her finger, got a manicure, her hair done. Also took the wheelchair, and one of the coolest things, she had a tray on the front of the wheelchair, which was transparent, and underneath they took a poster of the Backstreet Boys and cut out a section of it, and basically taped it underneath. They attached it with I don't know, the type of tapes, the see-through tape you put on in counter shelves. Everyone's like, "Here's what it is, Dave, here's what it is." Contact paper, yes, that's what it is. So, and it looked cool. So, and they tricked out the wheelchair a little bit more with a little bling and stuff like that. And, but Cheryl just was so excited, so thrilled by this. And her dad, his point at giving this breakout session was, you're so used to Cheryl and every day and just the routines and things that maybe are done for convenience, that you don't pull back and also look at the big picture of how your child is changing, from a child into a young adult, and how he and his wife kind of had missed over that, and maybe also subliminal part there where not wanting to move to that next step because of the challenges that did come with that. And he did mention that then you start having to think about, where's she going to live after she graduates and things like that, and what I call crystal balling. And I really caution people about that at IEP meetings and so forth, of trying to predict too far down the road what's going to happen for anybody, because you don't know and you create self-fulfilling prophecies. So that was one of the things that Dad talked about too, is he said, we take one day at a time, and there's amazing things that happen. But he was so excited to share the story, and he had some pictures up, that Cheryl had said, yeah, share these. So I just wanted to point that out because it goes along with the Roe story quite well. And this was in Wisconsin. So Module 3, Inclusion and the Other Kids. We hear that, at least I've heard, the parent might be upset because they feel a student with a disability has unfair accommodations, or that they're disruptive to the class. Now, research studies don't prove to a level of significance, or a relationship between a student with a disability being in the class and the class performance, and a student with a disability being in the class, or not being in the class and the class performance. So there isn't that type of argument to support that argument against inclusion. But what I think it comes down to is just parents today, including myself, the students that are in my daughter's class are much different than the students that were in my class when I was her age. And I think that's something parents aren't fully aware of, how things have changed. And another example would be like food allergies. The number of students today that have some kind of food allergy or other allergy, it's unbelievable, the numbers. So parents are kind of looking at, thinking of the classroom and thinking of that classroom as it was when they were in school, and not realizing the evolution of students, student needs, and also the way that instruction has evolved. You're going to have the option to watch a video. It's about 15 minutes long. I interview Greg. He spent a year in China and was able to have a student with a disability included in a school, and that was the first time ever at the school that they had a student with a disability included. The video is maybe 5-6 years old, still very relevant. I've talked to someone who was just over in China, came back, and said yes, the practices are still very, very much prevalent of if a child has a disability that they do not attend public school. One of the questions I asked Greg was, let's say that I'm an official in China and I have a lot of money and a lot of influence. Am I able to get my child with a disability into a public school? And he said no. There is no way you could buy, you could pay for the teacher, pay for an aide, pay for specialized equipment and so forth, and no. And also it was interesting too, that doctors would not diagnose autism, for example. Those diagnoses just didn't exist. I mean, maybe they were there in a doctor's mind, but culturally, not ready for that. So, I want to just reiterate, I'm not trying to convince you that inclusion is the only way to educate students. But what I'm trying to do through this class is to give a perspective, and also you've been extremely active as a class. I mean, with 20 students, and I go in and I check and I can see, like out of 20 students, that maybe it's been 24 hours since the very longest since someone has accessed class. I mean, it's remarkable, people coming in and posting, and trust me, I'm going in, I'm posting, I'm reading, but there's so many posts and trying to respond. But I am going through and reading. I'm so impressed. I am so impressed by what everybody is sharing. So please keep that up. And share your experiences. So many of you have jumped into that too and say, I've had this experience, or I've had this experience. And again, I encourage you to once you get into week 3, pace, slow just a little bit, but look at that video, Children of Darkness. I don't mention it anywhere else. Someone contacted me and said in the checklist the dates for when assignments are due are appearing wrong. So it might be like January 12th or something like that. That issue happened in a previous class and then it self-corrected. But the dates in the subject line, so you have the module 2 now, module 3 is open. In the subject line is the date, and that will always tell you the date that assignment is due. So always follow that and you'll be fine. I don't know what's happening with the checklist. There was an upgrade in Moodle, so the Moodle today is much better than it was prior to the upgrade. It was good then, but now it's just a better format. But in that process, some of these residual dates got pulled forward, and I do update the class regularly, so I'm not sure even kind of where some of these little remnants are, and they do seem after a while to self-correct. And if you do see something crazy like that pop up, don't worry about it. It's not going to have any impact on your grade. It is the date which is in the subject line. And I do apologize if those dates come up, because I go in and I worked with a student in the last class, and I said, okay, I'm going to go in, look at it on my side, double check, change it, resave it. Okay, now you open it, what do you see? And she would either see like the old date, or like she would see the new date. It just didn't make any sense. Just one of those little quirks. So, but again, I wish in some aspects I wish it was David Copperfield, and I could just make that disappear. But yeah, so I'm not very good at magic. I was better years ago, actually, when I taught. I was pretty good at a number of magic tricks with kids. You know, the one where you can separate the two-ply Kleenex into two and rip one up and then like unfold another one so it shows what you wrote. That one got me through a lot of icebreakers when I was working with new students. So pretty amazing. The amazing David. So I'm looking forward to Module 3, and again we'll have another Fireside chat next week. You're doing great. Any questions, please email me or text me. I was on vacation. I had the laptop with me. I have no other vacations left for my summer. So, you know, if you text me and say, hey, I just sent you an email, could you go in and take a look at it? I'll probably be able to get in there really fast and take a look or give you a text back. So, I can't believe the weather we're having. We're really fortunate right now to kind of be in this warm streak, but not this super hot streak. So getting to do a lot of things. And my 5-year-old already said, Dad, tomorrow morning we're going to take a bike ride. So we went 4 miles, and now we'll probably go a little longer for this next one. But she is really into riding her bike. So the only thing is, I have to remind her, when you come to a stop, you don't jump off the bike, and stay on the bike, just bring the bike to a stop. And I'm thinking, if I tried to jump off the bike and do what she did, no way, I'm not that nimble. But so she's telling me, guaranteeing we'll stay on the bike. So again, thanks for just being a wonderful class, and let's keep it rolling into Module 3.